Anwar. He is Pakistani by birth, and he is now a U.S. citizen. He has spent most of his adult life writing about the relationship between Pakistan and India. Also with us, Radha Kumar, a senior fellow student studying peace and conflict with the Council on Foreign Relations. She is Indian, and I would like to welcome both of you to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Radha Kumar, what will and can Rumsfeld do to ease tension?
I'm assuming that he's going to be very forthright with both sides. I think he could do a great deal if he could persuade both Pakistan and India to now begin to set goals, targets, and a timetable towards achieving those goals.
Okay, how do you see it, Mr. Kumar?
This is Imran Anwar
I'm sorry.
Here.
Excuse me, I apologize.
Not a problem. Basically, I tend to agree with what my fellow guest here says. What we have to keep in mind is that the approach that needs to be taken by the U.S. and also by Secretary Rumsfeld and President Bush is not to merely diffuse the situation from this week to happen something else to happen 2 weeks or 2 years from now. The issue is that not only does he have to be forthright, but he also has to be forceful in saying this is a problem that's not going to go away unless the root cause of the problem is solved. And that is what I would hope that they are going to plan to do.
And what could Mr. Rumsfeld do about the root problem, which is Kashmir?
Well, he can bring to bear on both sides that the only way to solve this problem is through both negotiations and through discussions, basically through equal and fair representation at the table, and also to find a solution for the people of Kashmir, not just whether, who has greater nukes or who has more soldiers at the border. That's never going to solve the problem. So he has to be very clear that, yes, we want to de-escalate this situation right now because it doesn't do any justice or any thing to serve the interests of 1 billion people, both on the Indian and Pakistani sides.
Imran, let me jump in here for a second. Do me a favor, let's go back to the beginning. Let's go to the basics and explain to us why this started and how it started.
Well, I'll try to give you my perspective, and my fellow guests might have a different perspective. But basically, when India and Pakistan were separated into two different countries, the idea was that Muslim majority areas would become what is now Pakistan, and Hindu majority areas would become India or Hindustan. Now, the Pakistani population tended to be on the eastern and western flanks of India, which led to the creation of a single country called Pakistan, but which had two parts, East Pakistan and West Pakistan. The state of Kashmir had a very high, between 75 and 90% Muslim population, but the governor or the Raja of the state was Hindu, and he opted to go with India. That would be tantamount to Governor Pataki saying that we, the people of New York State, should join Canada because that's what I want to do. So basically that's where the conflict started, and Pakistan sent in troops to try to keep Kashmir from going into India. India had troops there, so it's split around 1/3, 2/3 between the two parties. But it's been an issue that's been going on for 50 years or more, and it needs to be solved so that the rights and the voice of the Kashmiri people are served.
Okay, Radha, let me get your perspective on this.
Well, let me say I think that the problem is a little bit more complicated than this. First of all, as far as the present situation in Kashmir is concerned, we do have to realize that there has been, over the past 12 years, an insurgency which has been rising in violence and in the use of violence, and that has been backed by the Pakistani government over this period in a variety of different ways, including, of course, funding and logistical support.
See,
also,
I'm going to jump in there, and excuse me, but obviously both sides sees it differently, and that's the problem. And the question is, can Rumsfeld do anything to help ease this conflict? We have to take a break right now. After the news, we will continue. And welcome back, everybody. Talkback Live. I'm Marthel Neville. We're talking about the danger of nuclear war between India and Pakistan. And I'd like to ask my guest, what is the likelihood of a nuclear war, and or a war, and if so, would either of these countries use nukes? Radha.
Unfortunately, we can't rule it out. The current thinking is that if there is a war, if that war escalates and becomes a wider war than one that is just limited to the Himalayan parts of Kashmir, then the pressures on Pakistan to use its nuclear weapons will be very high indeed. And there's also, of course, the great danger of rogue elements being able to lay their hands on those nuclear weapons in Pakistan.
I think I agree with that analysis, and in some of the analysis I've done myself. In at least 3 out of 4 scenarios that I foresee, the use of nuclear weapons is imperative, whichever side uses them first. So that in itself is a scary thought. Even if each of those scenarios has a likelihood of between 20 and 70%, the fact that 75% of the scenarios involve nuclear weapons is a pretty scary thought. And then additionally, keeping in mind that none of these parties will want the weapons to be destroyed before they have been used, they'll have to be moved around. So the greater risk also, and which is why this is an important issue for the American public to worry about, not just the destruction of 1 billion lives in India and Pakistan, but the fact that even if that does not turn into a nuclear war, the risk of one of those weapons finding its way onto U.S. soil is much greater, and that's something we really have to worry about.
Why is that?
Well, there are several reasons that would make that possible. One is when you are in a state of chaos, especially in a country that itself does not have a huge communications infrastructure, like Pakistan or India even, the risk of one person simply saying, hey, this thing can get me a pretty good deal on the open market, so to speak, or the black market, the incentive is quite high. Secondly, there might actually be somebody who's politically or religiously motivated with religious fervor and say, the government might give in, but I am going to use whatever weapon I can get my hands on. So all these possibilities basically make it more likely that something like this can happen. And that's why I definitely think we need to worry, and that's why we, as the United States, need to make sure that we put pressure on both sides to both de-escalate and put these nuclear arsenals where they belong, which is in safekeeping mode.
Imran Anwar and Radha Kumar, thank you both for joining us here today.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
And up next, we're switching